Hello, everyone. Hi, welcome. Hello. Feel free to show your beautiful faces. Love to see who's here. Hi. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Wilder Words. This is the 24 Pearl Street faculty reading for winter 2025. My name is Jennifer Jean, and I am your host. Wilder Words is a free event that introduces the Fine Arts Work Center's online programming faculty to our community, especially to potential students who want to get to know the work of the faculty, see their faces, support their work. Throughout the program tonight, we will be posting links to each reader's upcoming workshop. Feel free to email me after the reading if you have any questions about those workshops or about any of our online programming at the Fine Arts Work Center. You can reach me at jjean@fawc.org. And you can also, throughout the reading, you can send me a direct message if you have a very specific question about anything that was said or about the workshops, or if you have a tech issue. You can also email me if you get knocked out of the program and you want to find your way back in. You can send an email. Again, I'm going to say my email address one more time, jjean@fawc.org. Okay. So, as well, throughout the reading, it would be great if everyone muted their microphone and you got cozy, you grabbed your cup of tea or whatever drink you have with you and settle in. And feel free to add comments in the chat. Encourages our readers and it helps us build community and get to know each other. So feel free to do that too. Right. Okay, so we're going to begin now. We're going to be reading, the readers are going to be reading in alphabetical order according to last name. And so we are beginning with one of our new faculty, Didi Jackson, who is the author of the poetry collection My Infinity, Moonjar as well. And her poems have appeared in American Poetry Review, Bomb, The New Yorker, Oxford American, among other journals and magazines. She has had poems selected for the Best American Poetry anthology for the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day series, as well as the Slowdown with Tracy K. Smith, and in Together in Sudden Strangeness, Americans Poets Respond to the Pandemic. That's another anthology. She is the recipient of the Robert H. Winter Memorial Award from the Poetry Society of America. She's also a Dean's Faculty Fellow at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, where she teaches creative writing. Most recently, she completed her certification as a Tennessee Naturalist, which I think is really an interesting fact. Totally cool to have our poets and our faculty engaging the world in interesting ways. So join me in welcoming Didi Jackson.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you for having us all read. I'm excited to read with everybody, Susanna, Carl, and Ruben. I'm checking time. Okay. So I'm going to read just a couple poems from My Infinity. And I did change my last poem to a love poem, but because my workshop is going to be about how to write a great love poem, not just a love poem, but a great one. Anyway, we'll see if you'll be up to y'all to think if that's a great one at the end. All right. All right, here we go. Poem with the last line as the first. In the end, I made myself live. I am the farthest north of my life, and I know I'm supposed to love this world, though I could shut the door and pull the drapes until they overlap like two palms in prayer. But the tree lichens are shifting from green to red, and I miss the summer's scent of lilacs and the bark pockets of trees that fill with the nests of chickadees. I understand the longing for monastic life, all aslant. And when I read the Russian poets, I know I'm not the only one who equates church bells with death tolls. Sometimes the setting sun is too heavy for the mountains to hold. How many times has your red hot prayer slipped from your hands? This collection revolves around the artist Hilma af Klint, and just for sake of time, she did an exhibition at the Guggenheim in 2018. That's when I first came across her work, and there's so much I could talk about. This poem kind of gives a little background on her. She was a Swiss poet, a Swiss visual artist, and is the first abstract artist ever. I mean, so she predates Mondrian, she predates Kandinsky. Her work went into hiding for about 40 years, and she died kind of unknown. And she was part of this group called the Femme. There are 5 women who were doing seances and trying to speak with the dead. She had lost a sister. And I was just fascinated with her for my own reasons of wanting to speak with the dead or curiosity of what comes next, but also just her life and as a woman being forgotten to history, and then the reemergence of her work in 2018, which is just, if anyone went to that exhibition that year, it was amazing. And it was the largest exhibition that the Guggenheim has had yet. Most attended, highly attended. They had to extend the dates and the hours, and just amazing. So they often participated in automatic writing to kind of get started before they would do any kind of communication with the high masters. And there were 5 individual spirits that kind of instructed her on how to paint her work. So this is a poem about getting started to automatic writing. It opens with the quote, it was not the case that I was to blindly obey the high lords of the mysteries, but that I was to imagine that they were always standing by my side. That's from Hilma. And this is in her voice. I wanted to see the invisible, those interstates of light beams that click easily into place, like the months on a calendar, the imponderable lines that mark, then puncture a hole into the next life, a place without grass or dirt, without all that is tangible in this world. I learned the price would be high to enter the trance and talk with those who were able to drag themselves from bliss toward all they might want to forget. I pounded on the door to unlock another reality. Look at my hand, how it scribbles the words decipherable only to me, dictating in automatic text the language of the dead, like the alarm calls of birds or the soft companion calls they make to keep track of each other. Look at my wrist, spiraling like a small snake sliding from its skin. See as I catch with each character all I need to know with my pen. I am another woman hungry and ruthless for knowledge. Listen to the 4 others of Defem warn me of the dangers as they watch my rhythmic and repetitive marks fill notebook after notebook. My sister dead for 2 decades, still a shadow on my wall at night. Notice there is always room at the seance for one of the high masters to request another spiral, another guarded banded snail shell, a continual growth, the tail of the double helix forming the exact ladder rungs I will need to climb to finish my temple. Interesting, they were asking her to create a temple for her work, and the temple would have been in the shape of a spiral. And then, of course, the Guggenheim in New York is in the shape of a spiral. And that's really when she really hit, I think, when I say hit it big, I mean, she's long dead, but like her work kind of came back into our mainstream consciousness. Necromancy. And then the room stilled. Just outside the window, the robin took flight. The elm's thin arms thrashed against the glass, and we settled in, our fingers touching the edges of the planchette, a heart adrift on a sea of letters, talking board, spirit board, witch board. Words came in as if on radio waves carried by the wind. The blackness of the unknown was a giant pond into which we were willing only to go ankle deep. We covered mirrors so the deceased would not be trapped, so whoever answered our auction-like calls and queries could return to where they came from. No one wanted to play medium. Our dimmed lights flickered like tiny asterisks. I was lost in the thicket of my dead. We all have too many. My friend watched 2 husbands slowly die of cancer. Twice a widow, her strength melted like sugared candy on her tongue. So many questions we all have, tucked under our living being wings, us, small baby birds, quaking at the edge of a nest, testing our feathers for flight. Let's see. A love poem. It feels so dissonant to kind of go from talking with the dead, but talking with a loved one, but maybe that isn't so crazy. Let's see. First bird. So I did do the Tennessee Naturalist program. I am a birder. I love watching birds. I'm a little worried about bird flu, of course, right now, and still feeding my birds. I've been looking to make sure it's still safe to do so. I wash my hands, all of that, but I worry about what's coming. Anyway, this is titled First Bird, and it came after me hearing that the first bird you see in the new year is your kind of bird for the year, like the characteristics of that bird, so to kind of stick with you. So I thought that was an interesting thought. So first bird. The first bird I see in the brand new year is a chickadee. And according to birders, it is now my theme bird, industrious, curious, no jukebox of melody, but instead a 2 or 3 note simple song. The drop tones of "Hey, sweetie," outside our bedroom window, where we rest a moment, naked, our desire rooting us to each other, our ankles like anchors, your coined eyes on my Willendorf figure, my freckles like splashes of sweet vermouth. It is winter, and the heat of the room tricks us into cracking a window to allow the smallest ribbon of yellow to touch the bed, then to move across your face like a honeyed blessing of mercy. I know the days on the calendar itch like fledglings, each at the lip of their nest, ready for flight, and that your parents told you not to wish your life away. How esoteric of them, the old, though now we are the age they were, lip to lip, nose to nose, belly to belly. And on this cold day, I want to eat you, an excoriation of your body in the manner of the Eucharist. For if you become part of me, and then I know, for if you become part of me, then I will know and help carry all of your suffering and you mine. And I think I'll end there. I think that's a nice ending on a love poem is I think a good spot to end on. So yeah, there you go. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Truly.
Thank you so much, Didi. That was great. And I put this in the chat. I'm not sure if everyone saw it, that her workshop ends on Valentine's Day, fittingly, because she's teaching about how to write a great love poem. Not easy to do. All right, so now we're going to turn to our next reader, Carl Phillips, who is not new to the Fine Arts Work Center, but new to 24 Pearl Street. He is the author, most recently, of Scattered Snows to the North. I love that book. And then The War, Selected Poems, 2007 to 2020, which won the 2023 Pulitzer Prize. His other honors include the Jackson Poetry Prize, the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award, Los Angeles Times Book Award, the Aiken Taylor Award for Modern American Poetry, as well as fellowships from the Guggenheim and the Academy of American Poets, as well as the Academy of Letters, Arts and Letters, and the Library of Congress. He has also written 3 prose books, most recently, My Trade is Mystery, 7 Meditations from a Life in Writing. And after over 30 years teaching at Washington University in St. Louis, Carl lives on Cape Cod in Massachusetts. Please join me in welcoming Carl Phillips.
Hello. Thank you, Jennifer, and thanks for inviting me to be part of the Wilder Words series, and it's a pleasure to be reading with everyone here. Hi, audience. It's strange still to me to be on a computer and in sweatpants doing a reading. Anyway, all right, I'm going to start my little timer. Oh, there I am. I'm just going to read poems from the most recent book, Scattered Snows to the North. So here are some. This is called Regime. As I took off my clothes, I watched him taking his own off. The sound of rain was, for once, not the sound of wind shaking the rain steadily loose from a stand of river birch. It's hard to believe in them, the beautiful colors of extinction. But these are the colors. This is called Before All of This. And as usual, early summer seems already to hold inside it the split fruit of late fall, those afternoons whose diminished music will soon enough lie down in, surprised a little, to feel it all surprised. Meanwhile, how the wind sometimes makes the slenderest trees, still young, bend over, makes me think of knowledge conquering superstition. I can almost believe in that until the trees, like fear, spring back. Then a sad sort of quiet just after, as between two people who have finally realized they've stopped regretting the same things. It's like they've never known each other. Yet, even now, waking, they insist they've woken from a dream they share, forgetting all over again that every dream is private. Whatever the reasons are for the dead underbranches of the trees that flourish here, that the dead persist is enough. For me, it's enough. The air stirs like history, like the future, like history. All right, this is called Vikings. There's a number of poems in here about groups of people, Vikings, gladiators, surfers, mechanics. These are Vikings. The Vikings thought the wind was a god, that the eyes were holes. A window meant a wind eye for the god to see with, and at the same time through. I used to hate etymology. What's the point? I'd whisper. I was quieter back then, less patient, though more easily pleased. I am pleased to have been of use, I used to say to myself, after sex with strangers. Leaning hard against the upstairs window, I'd watch them make their half-proud, half-ashamed-looking way wherever, and if it was autumn, whether in fact or only metaphorically, I'd watch the yard fill with leaves, then with what I at first thought was urgency, though it usually turned out just to be ambition. I'd leave the window open, as I do now. If closed, I open it, then pull the drapes shut across it, which, of the many I've tried, remains the best way I know still to catch a wind god breathing. All right, this next poem is the title poem of the book, which means it must be called Scattered Snows to the North. I'm trying to look at the right part of this computer. I don't want to look the way my father does when I do selfies with him, where he's looking old and lost, but I fear it might be too late. And that, what I just said now, is why I don't say much in between poems, because it's a little ridiculous. Okay, Scattered Snows to the North. Does it matter that the Roman Empire was still early in its slow unwinding into never again? Then, as now, didn't people burst into tears in front of other people or in private for no reason that they were willing to give, or they weren't yet able to, or for just no reason? I've never stopped missing you, I used to practice saying, for when I'd need those lines, as I assumed I would, given what I knew then, nothing really, about things like love, trust, the betrayal of trust, and a willfulness that's only deepened inside me all these years, during which I can almost say I've missed no one, though it hurts to say it. Honestly, the Roman Empire, despite my once having studied it, barely makes any sense to me now, past the back and forthing of patrolled borders as the gauge and proof of hunger's addictive and erosive powers. But there were people, of course, too, most of them destined to be unremembered, who filled in their drawn lives anyway, because what else is there, to where the edges gave out? If it was night, they lit fires, presumably. Tears were tears. Here's a sort of short poem called, it's not on the page I wrote down that it's on this page. It's called Western Edge. I need you the way astonishment, which is really just the disruption of routine, requires routine. Isn't there a shock, though, a thrill to having done what we had to? Unequally, but in earnest, we love as we can, he used to mumble, not so much his mouth moving, more the words themselves sort of staggering around lost inside it. Now, show me exactly what you think being brave is. Okay, this poem's a little longer. It's called Heroic Interval. Here it is. Up from the bottom of wherever in the mind things go to be forgotten, most of them forever, he reappears at the edge of that meadow inside me I've spent most of my life trying to convince others isn't made up at all, but real, as he was, is. Above him, a bewilderment of black swans pulling their bodies across a band of nightfall, though it can't be night, for the meadow's not dark yet. It keeps flashing like a basin of water set down in sunlight. As he walks towards me, it almost looks like the routine gesture with interruptions that I used to think love more or less came down to. Before I figured out I could stop, I could always have stopped, and should maybe try to. Closer. He parts the grasses breast high in front of him, his arms like blades meant for winnowing intimacy from tenderness or nostalgia from truth. Nothing's changed. Still the kind of man who sees no reason to take his gloves off, assassin gloves, during sex. Still what feels like a dream at first. That moment in dream when a friend you've learned not to trust entirely turns to tell you, half threatening it, half consolation, the only dream is this one. But it isn't a dream. I can tell. He'd be taking his gloves off. He'd be raising his soft hands to his face. Scorched map, busted compass. He'd have a face. Alrighty. On that sinister note, let us turn to a poem called Stop Shaking. Stop shaking. Not the bell, I said. One of us did. Not the bell, but the smaller sounds, barely noticeable, trapped inside it. It seemed the kind of thing I might say to remind myself, when I've forgotten again, what I want to believe even now matters most: precision. Though it's hard these days to know for sure what's true. Isn't every season, no matter what we call it, shadow season? Didn't Timothy used to mean a meadow, a common name, back then at least, for the sweetest grass? I keep making the same avoidable few mistakes that I've always made, and then regretting them, and then regretting them less. Think of all the suffering happening everywhere, all the time, for nothing. What if memories just the dead, flourishing differently, from how they flourished alive. All right, there are two more poems. Well, there are no more than two. There might be fewer than that. Let's see here. Okay, this is called Back Soon, Driving. The way the present cuts into history, or how the future can look at first like the past sweeping through. There are blizzards, and there are blizzards. Some contain us, some we carry within us until they die when we do. The snow falls there, barely snowing, into a long wooden trough where the cattle feed on those apples we used to call medieval, or I did, for their smallish size, as if medieval meant the world in miniature, but not so different otherwise from our own, just smaller, a bit sweeter, more prone, therefore, to rot quickly, which is maybe not the worst thing. Revelation is not disclosure. I love how the snow, taking itself now more seriously, makes the cattle look softer for a moment than their hard bodies are. And, yep, I think this time I'm going to finish with this poem, Rehearsal. By then the point of the forest was the getting through it. Then it lay behind them, all but its sharper details, flies licking at dried blood, I think, on a random tree stump, getting swiftly lost. Its muffled bird song, too, that had come less, it seemed, from the trees than from beneath mostly, as if somewhere deep, deep inside the earth. Maybe meeting you has been the one good reason I lasted so long in a world that must eventually not include me, I almost said to him. Past the forest, the shore, where the land ended, where briefly the waves hitting it seemed the latest example of how squandering momentum can become routine, while upon the waves, the taken for grantedness of shadow play seemed its own example, how one way to prove power can be to quietly assume it. Then, except for offshore where the dark lay like, defiantly, a ship at anchor, everything was itself, as it always had been. They took off their shoes, their clothes. They swam out to the dark ship. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl. That was wonderful. And we're really happy to have you here as part of 24 Pearl Street. And yeah, and as part of this reading. So we're going to turn to our next reader right now, who is a wonderful poet, another favorite of mine. His name is Ruben Caseta. His latest poetry collection is Brutal Companion, winner of the Barrow Street Press Editors Prize. And he is also the editor of the anthology Latinx Poetics, Essays on the Art of Poetry, which won an Independent Publisher Book Award in 2023. His work appears in The Believer, American Poetry Review, and as part of the Best American Poetry series, as well in the Harvard Review and the New York Times Magazine. He has received fellowships from the Gentile Foundation and Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and he's zooming in from Chicago. Please join me in welcoming Ruben Caseta.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. This is a wonderful reading, and I'm happy to be a part of it. So I'm going to read a lot of poems that are musical in nature. I think it'll align well with the course that I'm teaching. And this is called Country Words for America. A word unheard to hullabaloo, cub chew, I slurred namby-pamby to, aloud in a crowd combing my hair in a honeycomb house, and a pair approach the door, confer a barbed cry not heard before. In this jungled sky, queer fandangled words blanket the air amid unswept rooms, caribou herds, gutting white haired, moss chew, gummet loose, a four-flush scared, juicy calaboose, rice truck, quirly pross, roostered western glow, brassy Betsy Ross, spangles in tow. I don't want to get too dark. I was going to read a poem about an airplane. It's actually a pretty lovely poem, so I'm going to read it, despite what's happening in the world today, in memory of those who were recently lost. Anecdote of an air crash. I dreamt I was a weightless ribbon, an astronaut alight in a lilac hurricane of sunlight. On the first morning of flight, I am alone in the warring morning with a lit cigarette. I flick it off a bridge when my flesh gives in above a lagoon of lights, past freeway, past traffic. Do not enter into the past. I stare and watch cars everywhere, stuck together all over town. I am in love with rows of planets and comets coming into view toward a queue of clouds. I am drunk on this highway we loved. A boom of smog meets me, a tensile curve of road, a forest of homes rise with lilies. I'm tired of being told the world won't be worth much in a million years, though it can't be true or must never be. How difficult it must be in this body, believe me, in this flesh. Watch this car fly in the distance. Cargo ships sail. We fly well past tomorrow like a god through the night, thick with stars. I lived in Lubbock, Texas for a while, and I wrote a poem about it. Buddy Holly, the great rock and roll musicians from Lubbock, and there's a song about that says that happiness is Lubbock in the rearview mirror. And so I hope to capture that here. This is called In Lubbock, Texas. There's a park with dips and mounds of crabgrass streaming into patches of rust-colored dirt, where you ride your horse. It's always hot in Texas. Even in winter, the snow doesn't stay for more than a night or two. Nothing ever wants to stay in Lubbock. I mean, no one ever wants to be there with its mediocre produce and vacant sidewalks, worn and cracked. Nobody bothers to walk anymore. That's what pickup trucks are for. You drive 2 minutes to the store and back. There's a song that says, happiness is Lubbock in the rearview mirror. Bless Mac Davis, bless Buddy Holly. Here in the dark, the branches brush against the glass, always watching from above. Still, I have no idea what a horse is like. Of course, I've seen them on television as a child. I watched The Lone Ranger and Mr. Ed. For a time, I believed animals could talk. I have never known a horse, but I've always talked to my pets. My snow-colored parakeet named Frosty sang to me when I spoke to him. I mimicked learning to conjure the spirit of his mouth, of his music in my mouth. But how does one speak horse? I've read that a horse's ear is as delicate as the skin of a girl's wrist. Their buttonhole dark eyes are a storm that never settles, looking into you as it breaks the earth with only a whisper. This is a poem I rarely read, but it feels good to read aloud. This is called Obad. Antelucan we lie, your body moons against mine. Earlier, I stoked sweat on your neck in the humming of this light. In the dark, I listen now resigned. You mumble about the arms of a pinyon pine, saying it points to a falling star against the pool of sky. We hear the grackles chatter as they fly past a church lot. Then headlights shine on your face, splitting it, listless lips, half open eyes. Staring out, I wait for the occult wreckage of night to vanish from this world and hold out until its final moment, until I fall asleep and get lost. Your body is light like tulle, carried off by a strong current, taken from me as I helix in the light. I'll read one short poem, and again, thank you. This is My Mother is a Garden. She plants razzleberry fringe flowers in the backyard as the chartreuse golden feather farewell next door. Before my birth, she is acquired by the United States, coerced by the American zodiac dream. She fled to Los Angeles. Decades later, she still withholds from speaking English, and only fertile names of flowers have taken root. She is luminous, her hair a blackish gray against the philodendron, parted long. I lose her in the shade of overgrown impatiens hanging onto the hillside behind the house. The horizon undulates with barberry and nettles, deer grass waves of silver. Years have passed not speaking with my mother, but today I surprise her with a visit. In the glow of the window, I watch her tend to her roses and notice that I have taken the shape of her hips. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruben. That was so powerful. It's great to hear your voice. So we're going to invite now a wonderful prose writer and longtime teacher, actually with 24 Pearl Street, Susanna Sonnenberg, who is the author of 2 memoirs, Her Last Death and She Matters, A Life in Friendships. Her recent essay, Mirage, was a notable selection in 2024's Best American Essays. She is the recipient of fellowships from McDowell, Yaddo, and Gerasi. I'm so sorry for mispronouncing that foundation, among many others. She has taught widely and been on the summer faculty at Fine Arts Work Center in person. She's running a in-person workshop this summer, actually, but she's been doing such workshops since 2017. She lives in Missoula, Montana, which I believe she is at right now and Zooming from. Please join me in welcoming Susanna Sonnenberg.
Thank you. Hi, welcome to everybody. And thank you, Jennifer, for having me. Thank you, beautiful poets, for reading. I knew I was reading with poets, so I chose an essay about language. It's an older essay, which is really like digging out your prom picture and showing it to people. That's how I feel about this. But we'll just see. And I'm reading it a little excerpted to stay within the time. And I also want to mention that I am teaching a 24 Pearl Street month-long synchronous class on writing memoir that begins on Monday. And you can look at the website for information on that. So I'm a nonfiction writer, a memoir writer, and this is an essay about moving to Montana. It's called Slurry Drainage Frontage Road. Before I came to Montana, I'd never heard frontage road. Or if I had, its meaning was so thoroughly irrelevant, I didn't bother to ask for it. In my early teens, my mother moved us from New York City to New Mexico, over the top in love with reddening hills at sunset, the lavender twilights over the Rio Grande. I didn't care. Taos could have been the moon, and I wouldn't have noticed. I cared about boys, records, rides, and privacy. I learned gorge when someone was holding a party there and I needed a lift. The West did not speak to me. Then 15 years later, long after my mother had departed for other landscapes, after my time in college and Paris, then London, Los Angeles, and more of New York, I moved to Montana for a really good guy and found myself in a city of 50,000 residents, again on the moon. This time I paid attention and saw strangeness. I succumbed to the prickle of culture shock. My landmarks were gone, my habits and skills useless. I'd never car camped, had never pulled off at a fishing access or seen a game license, or measured anywhere by a mile marker. I had never seen a deer up close in the bed of a pickup. I didn't even know how to look and kept expecting its tongue to move. My husband, as he was to become, was a Westerner, a descendant of Mormon settlers, a grandson of a sheep rancher. Andrew knew his way around, and he knew the ways. A line of trees or brush running low through a field meant water. The unobtrusive brown roadside signs numbered Forest Service roads. As we drove, he'd point at a scattering of antelope, or the bald eagle at the peak of a dead tree, or the brown rabbit vanishing into the bramble, and I always looked too late, after we'd passed, spotting nothing. I didn't know what could be seen. My eye, arrested by a billboard promoting salvation or a discount motel, sought the filler and landmarks, and, finding none, informed my brain this was a nothingness, a non-place, a place where nothing happened. Andrew gave me Wallace Stegner to read, Ivan Doig, William Kittredge, Gretel Ehrlich, James Welch. It felt like pressure. Place, he said, it's about place. But not a place that interests me, I thought, not the place where something is happening. He stopped the car during storms and we'd roll down the windows. We'd sit in the spattering hail or rains, smell the dust gone damp and the drenched sage, and he was relaxed, complete. I liked it. But then it was time to go home. I wished he wouldn't say, we'll take the frontage road, or let's see what's up this drainage. What about place for me? I had place, paved squares and glass panes, the neat box of a gilded elevator, the hushed carpeted lobby of a midtown movie theater. My New York friends assumed I'd be back. A few visited, always joking first thing about the size of the plane or the quiet empty airport or the taxidermied grizzly on display there. News of Montana did not reach them on NPR, which told them stories about themselves. New York, my stepmother said during one of her rare visits, is the center of everything. You can't argue with that. It just is. My husband and I did not argue because we appreciated that arguing with a New Yorker who felt she was at the center of everything was wasted effort. Besides, I still sort of believed she was right, sort of still believed in restaurant reviews, opera outings, Olmsted's crafted design of the landscape. I still failed to hear center and everything as the natural world was trying to make known to me. This is where snowberry grows. This is when the runoff is high. Here is where the burn was the worst. When my husband took me to Fairview, Utah for the first time, he dropped me off at his grandparents' house and went fishing alone. I was intimidated by the potential boredom and my inexperience and had opted to stay at the house, which was maintained by absent aunts and uncles, his grandparents long dead. I wanted him to have whatever it was fishing afforded him, solitude and clarity, checking in on the banks and waters, the rhythms of dirt roads. These were meaningless to me, and I had no language of my own to give them meaning, which made me resent them. I stepped through the screen door into the sun, out of the kitchen with its wallpaper decades out of fashion, away from the high-backed formal furniture in the front room covered in sheets. I craved action and scanned for it as I stood on the edge of the slim lawn, mowed once a week by a neighbor. A car or two passed. One road ran straight through the silent town, connecting it to Mount Pleasant, tall dry grasses waving and scratching, separating blacktop from pasture, where sleepy cows went about their sleepy business. Across the street, a door opened in a brick house, and a woman with a scarf over a white hairdo took her time down her steps and off the curb until she reached me. "Now, who are you?" she said. "Visiting the Petersons?" "I'm Andrew's friend. That's Lewis's oldest boy," I said, because that's how I'd heard him identify himself. "We're just here for a couple of days." She peered at me, checking on the Petersons' house. "I'm from New York City," I added. We watched as another few cars drove through. "Well, it's getting to be like New York City around here," she said. "So busy." I was about to crack a joke, join her sarcasm, when I realized she meant what she'd said. With her whole history, she regarded the landscape and gave the changes this name, a label of extreme foreignness. I stood there, an emblem of busyness, in her Fairview. Fairview, no stoplight, one gas station, one store for Andrew to pick up his fishing license and tip it, the Mormon ward house, an old tiny library, a new tiny post office, a couple of roads splitting away from the main passage, leading up to the ranches or the cemetery or someone's alfalfa fields. Emptiness beyond that, surrounding everything. "I'm in the middle of nowhere," I whispered on the phone to one of my city friends, who agreed and said, "Come back." In Montana, I met other people who used, sorry, it's always hard when you're trying to excerpt while you read. In Montana, I drove behind cars with stickers that read, "This family supported by timber dollars," and joked, without a clue to the political histories, the fights, the fragile economy I'd eventually understand. I met people in the army for the first time, and people with sons and daughters in Iraq. One friend worked every summer in Alaska on a fishing boat. "Alaska? Wow," I said. Jack London, as close as I'd come, a voice of another age and enterprise, a century-old conjuring of something so remote that for all I knew, it no longer existed. Eventually, I knew so many people who'd lived there or went there that Alaska ceased to be the punchline of extremity and distance it had always been before Montana. It grew real. It mattered. Eventually, I'd go there myself. Everything in my former cities existed for what's in it for me, even if that was never voiced so crudely. Lightning, for instance, a spectacle, a natural firework, then over. But now I knew people who spent summer months in wilderness lookout towers, and I heeded which direction the lightning strikes moved, and suppose the very drainage where they touched down, how flammable that might be because of low runoff. From our porch, we watched the slurry plains over Mount Sentinel. Our neighbor was a smoke jumper. I see differently now, smell and hear. The pine beetle has discolored the treescape. The arable fields around the city have been pushed under formaldehyde houses and garage. I read the articles about the scarcity of wolves and owls, and I wait for the geese to call in late November before I even realize it's late November. I know why people have cords of wood in the beds of their trucks or hay balanced to toppling, that morel mushrooms grow in the burnt forest, that the windy howl of a cook stove is part of camping. I see the snouts and flanks visible behind the tin bars of a trailer passing on the freeway. Black ice is no longer a term, a mystery, a footnote to a London Review of Books article. It's real, right here. It paves my winters. It's pulled my two dear friends into a ravine off a mountain highway and totaled their light truck. Black ice, they said over and over as they told the story. It was black ice. My two dear friends left Missoula and moved to Alaska. I miss them, my town and life smaller without them. We'd name them godparents, watch them get married. They'd been gone 5 years when we drove our two sons up through British Columbia and the Yukon, crossing the Yukon River to the top of the World Highway. I often spotted the pale deer, the gray coyote, the motionless doll sheep pressed against cliff sides before Andrew did, and we made our children look and see. We came to the mining town of Healy, where our friends lived. Andrew staked our tent in front of their cabin, the bottom layer billowing over the unruly tundra. We all prepared for our 3-day trip into Denali National Park. Our friends told us what to do, how to pack. The boys carried their sleeping bags and mats, a few pairs of socks. We'd broken in our boots. In unexpected sunshine, a bus left us on Denali's one road, and we scrambled down a small rise into the open, Ice Cream Gulch before us. I had a hair tie, a blister kit, Carmex, tools of immediacy, ways to press into the surroundings. We knew what to do if we saw wolves, bears, or moose. We made our random way, unguided by trail because there was none. We stepped where we could step, edging along the river bars, avoiding wet if we could, tiring and resting and beginning again. The next morning, after the food had been secured in the bear-proof canisters and propped among rocks downwind of camp, we headed up. The slope defined the view ahead of us, but when we turned around to sit and rest, Denali showed over the distant saddle. Its scope and scale rendered the 40 miles between us ridiculous. Bigness absorbed me. There was no longing, no needing, no having. The voices of people I loved best traveled up and down the slope, and when the wind calmed around my ears, I could hear them. As we ascended, the earth turned silkier, slippery, rocks smooth and jagged. I used my fingers, leaning in, grabbing at the rocks. It was difficult work for me, not for my experienced friends and young boys. In the wedge of the steep valley, I decided to stay while the others moved up. It's a hard climb, my friend said, the scree like this. Scree? All this, the small sharp rocks that make up the side of the slope. It's hard to get a grip, dig in. There was a name. And there was a name for this, for this, for this. She knew them, she would use them, then I would say them. Scree, talus, shale. They left me, and I regarded the surroundings, feeling how fertile and agile and fragrant and ancient and necessary the land was. From pavement, I'd had no idea what was at stake. I used to call this nowhere, nowhere, left to be itself, what it had always been, nowhere. Explosions of species, unfolding of insect hatch, water carving against shallow banks, stripes and whorled patterns in the rocks, places filled up but with space, sky, transparent, yes, but not nothing, not an absence. I understood the honor of being this guest, making my few hatches against an incomprehensible canvas. I was the nowhere, the finite atom, the mortal irrelevant molecule. Thank you.
Wow, that was a wonderful piece, but I was saying wow about the ending just to myself. It was really incredible. Thank you so much, Susanna. And as Susanna said, she has a workshop starting this Monday. It's how to start your memoir. So if you also have a memoir rolling around in your noggin there, Susanna's the one to turn to. She's a wonderful writer and teacher. If you have questions about her workshop or anybody's workshop, Carl's or Ruben's or Didi's workshop, you can email me. I put my email again in the chat, jjean@fawc.org. A lot of times students are writing to me asking what's the best fit for them, and they have certain parameters. They're looking for asynchronous or live via Zoom, or different genres, maybe crossing genres. They're not used to a certain genre. I can answer all your questions to the best of my ability, but I will definitely attempt to answer everyone's question. We have upcoming events at 24 Pearl Street, other free community events, one of which is the student open mic night. So if you're a student in any of these faculty members or other faculty members' classes, you can sign up to be part of that. We do the same thing. We record it and we share it with our tens of thousands, literally, of folks in our newsletter, so people will see your reading if you're part of that student open mic night. And yeah, being part of the classes is just a must do, especially right now. There's so much going on in the world. People have stories to tell. I know you do. I do. So this is the time to sign up for sure. So I'm going to end things now. The last thing I'll say is that you'll receive this recording in an email, as well as it'll be accompanied by a code that will give you a discount for any class, because we do that for our Wilder Words attendees, because we love you so much. So everyone, keep dreaming and keep writing and be well. And I'm signing off now. Take care.